Councilor Miglieri.
Good evening. The time is 6:01 on Monday, March 30th. This is a meeting of the Finance Committee. I'm Chairwoman Lila Migliarelli, and joining me are Vice Chair Councilor Stewart, voting members Councilor Garapay, Councilor Jamaluddin, Councilor McMaster, and President Grigoritis ex officio, and non-voting members Councilor Eccles, Councilor McNaught, Councilor Thomas, Councilor Trementosi, and Councilor Sanella. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15th order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Finance Committee will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public is permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the governor's executive order. A recording of this meeting will be posted on MMTV and the City of Melrose website as soon as possible following its conclusion. Due to the remote nature of our meeting, I would now like to entertain a motion to suspend Rule 29A for public comment. Councilor Thomas has made a motion, seconded by Councilor Garapay. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Migliarelli.
Here. Oh. Yeah. Yes.
Councilor Stewart.
Yes.
Councilor Garapay.
Yes.
Councilor Jamaluddin.
Yes.
Councilor McMaster.
Yes.
President Grigoritis. 6 yes.
It's passed and Rule 29A has now been suspended. The first and only order on our agenda for discussion tonight is Order 2020-67, renewal of surety bond for City Clerk, City of Melrose, in the amount of $15,000 for year 2020. This is a record-keeping order to formally state that the City Clerk is meeting the annual renewal of surety bond. I'll entertain a motion to place on file.
Well, point of order, maybe there's some discussion might be in order.
Yes, I thought we were motioning and then discussion, but yes. So I'll entertain discussion now.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just for the public's edification, could we just hear from Ms. Camosa just so she can describe the purpose of the surety bond and the renewal process?
Yes, Ms. Camosa, are you available to speak now?
Hi, I am. This is a requirement both of Mass General laws and the city ordinances that city clerks throughout the Commonwealth maintain a surety bond. It even defines the amount, just in case. I think it's honestly a very old law that's been on the books for a long time. And the purpose, I think, is specifically so if whatever reason we, as the record keeper of the city, made an error, we would have some financial recourse to correct the error.
Thank you, Ms. Camosa. Any other further questions? The motion, entertaining a motion to place on file.
Motion to place on file.
Motion made by Councilor Stewart. Seconded by Councilor Jamaluddin. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Migliarelli.
Yes.
Councilor Stewart.
Yes.
Councilor Garapay.
Yes.
Councilor Jamaluddin.
Yes.
Councilor McMaster. President Grigoritis.
Yes.
6 yes.
This order has now been placed on file. I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn, seeing as there are no other orders before us.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Councilor Stewart, seconded by Councilor Jamaluddin. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll, please?
Chair Migliarelli.
Yes.
Councilor Stewart.
Yes.
Councilor Garapay.
Yes.
Councilor Jamaluddin.
Yes.
Councilor McMaster.
Yes.
President Grigoritis.
Yes.
Yes. We are adjourned.
Finance Committee is now adjourned.
I will stop this recording and then head up to legal and legislative. So in a few minutes.
Good evening. Time is 6:15 PM on March 30th, 2020. This is a meeting of the Legal and Legislative Committee. I'm Councilor McNaught, the chair of this committee. Joining me are Vice Chair Tramontosi and voting council members Sanella, Eccles, Migliarelli, and President ex officio Grigoratis. We are also joined by non-voting members Thomas, Garape, Galamudine, Stewart, and McMaster. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Melrose City Council Legal and Legislative Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. No in-person attendance of members of the public is permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time, or in the event that we are unable to do so, we will post on the city's website. At this time, I will entertain a motion to suspend the rules for public comment.
Motion to suspend the rules for public comment.
Second.
Motion to suspend the rules for public comment by Councilor Tramontosi, seconded by Councilor Migliarelli.
Mhm.
Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Chairman McNaught,
Yes.
Councilor Tremontosi,
Yes.
Councilor Sanella,
Yes.
Councilor Eccles,
Yes.
Councilor Migliarelli,
Yes.
President Gregoritis. 6 yes.
And the motion passes. Seeing that there is no one here for public comment and no need to unsuspend the rules, we're here tonight to discuss Order 2020-66, a resolution for state action to combat nip bottle and single-use water bottle litter. This order was brought to us by Councilor Migliarelli, and I will let her speak to the order first if she so wishes. This is on discussion.
Thank you, Councilor McNaught. While the timeliness for this resolution may have passed, I believe there's the impetus behind it still stands. After doing my own research, receiving emails from constituents, and hearing from Zero Waste Melrose at the February 24th council meeting about how effective adding bottle deposits are to incentivize people to clean up litter, I think that it's imperative that Melrose joins other communities across the Commonwealth to voice our support for the proposed legislation to add bottle deposits to nip-sized bottles and plastic water bottles. As mentioned in the resolution, Melrose has already made great strides to curb the negative effects of plastic waste in our community by legislating the plastic bag and polystyrene ordinances. And I think supporting the action at the state level will help to mitigate the prevalence of this type of litter in our city as well. So while I understand that the bottle deposit practice is been suspended, when it does come back up and running, it'd be helpful to have this resolution already on file with the state legislature to show our support for this effort.
Thank you, Councilor Migliarelli. Councilor Tramontosi.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman McNaught. I get the issue regarding the nip bottles. We discussed that at a previous committee meetings on the liquor legislation, which I believe the mayor is going to be forming a commission to study our liquor rules and regulations, and I think we can address the issue of the nip bottles there. The resolutions like this are merely expressions of opinion, and I think that these type of resolutions should be limited in their use and scope and be very reasonable in their passages. They're merely symbolic, but again, my position is that resolutions should be rarely exercised by this body. I think we do a good job here in Melrose with our recycling efforts. And I don't think that there is broad range necessarily support for an extension of the bottle bill to plastic, single-use plastic bottles. I think we do a good job in our recycling efforts. And you know, if you want to express an opinion, talk to your state legislators, that's fine, you can do that. But for a resolution to be presented by this council as a representation of the city as a whole, I don't think is appropriate. I mean, I'm big in favor of recycling, and I think, again, we do a good job of it. The nip bottles can be addressed, but I don't think we need to address an extension of the bottle bill. I don't think it's appropriate for us to weigh in as a council. So I'm not going to be in support of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trementozzi. Councilor Sinella.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
First, I want to just commend Councilor Migliarelli, who did all the research and the work and put this together. So I commend your efforts for that. And I just want to say that in speaking with constituents in regards to both the liquor ordinance as well as the litter ordinance, it was a pretty big mix of folks that, you know, were from the camp of the litter camp, and then you had the ones that were more of a pro-business. Why can't we, you know, sell liquor and so forth? And I feel like this is kind of it's a win-win sort of you know, situation where on the one hand, you know, that ordinance shall pass. On the other hand, we're trying to set a precedent at the state level that why not put a tax on some of the smaller containers and the water bottles as well. So, you know, I feel like this is just a nice way to voice our constituents' concerns up through to the State House. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sinella. Do you have anyone else in the queue, Madam Clerk?
Counselor Eccles has his hand up.
Councilor Eccles.
So again, to echo the previous two councilors, I'd like to thank Councilor Migliarelli for putting this together. And I think that one thing that's really remarkable about the discussion that we had about revamping the liquor laws is that we rarely heard voices specifically in opposition to expanding into hard liquor, but we heard an overwhelming amount of concern about the liquor that was going to, or the litter that was going to be generated by nip bottles specifically. I think that there's precedent for a resolution like this in other communities, and I think that this lines up specifically with something that is being pushed in the state level right now. This is something that is not a piece of legislation that is not already working its way through the state legislature, so it's a nice way for us to express our opinion in favor of all of the constituents who took time to express their concerns about the litter created by the nip bottles. So I'll be supporting this resolution.
Counselor Jamaluddin was next. Counselor President McNaught.
Councilor Jamaluddin.
Although I am not a voting member, I would like to thank and commend Councilor Migliarelli for her effort and for putting this petition together. I think there is always room to improve, and it's never enough to improve ourselves in this community. So I think anything that can help to increase and improve our recycling would be great and a big improvement for our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilor Jamaluddin. Councilor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair McNaught, and thank you, Councilor Migliarelli, for providing this to the voting members of Legal and Legislative. To Councilor Trementozzi's position, I understand and respect that position, Mr. Chair, but I think given the nature and a lot of the strong feelings about this, particularly when we're discussing the broader context of bringing, to Councillor Eccles' point, bringing the spirits into the town and voting on that. There was a lot of discussion about the size of containers and potentially limiting that. I did not support NIPS at all for many reasons. One was for the litter, and I think it is at least from my perspective, it is our what's the right word? I think it's our responsibility to represent what we are hearing through the community. And what I have heard from the community is a number of facets about these NIPS, that it's not wanted in this community, but when it is, there is a strong interest in being able to minimize the litter that is happening, as well as the reducing the amount of plastic that's going to be presented into the community. So from that standpoint, I think it's important that as a community as a whole, we have a good opportunity here to represent a position that Melrose takes to the state in a strong manner. And this, I think, is consistent with a lot of the feedback that I've heard throughout the community. So from that standpoint, I would encourage the committee to strongly consider this to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Anyone else like to be heard?
Gregoritis is next.
President Gregoritis.
Chairman McNaught, and through you, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question because I am in support of this ordinance, which my understanding is that Councilor Migliarelli reached out to not only Senator Lewis's office, which encouraged us to file this because they wanted to hear from communities that would be impacted, but also that Zero Waste Melrose, our recycling group in town, is in support of this ordinance, of this resolution.
Thank you, President Gregoritis.
Yes, that's correct. I did reach out to Senator Lewis's office, as well as Zero Waste Melrose, and they were all supportive. And we've also received some constituent feedback on this as well. So, and also this was mirrored after resolutions done by several other communities. So it is not out of the norm. I would say we're just following along with other communities who are like-minded in their desire to create, sustainable communities and lessen the impact of litter in our city.
Thank you.
Thank you, councilors. President Gregoritis and Councilor Migliarelli. Is there anyone else that would like to be heard? Councilor McMaster.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a non-voting member of this committee as well, but I did think that it's at least important to impart some cautionary counsel on issue-based resolutions, as Councilor Trementozzi said. There may be precedent in other communities, as Councilor Migliarelli mentioned, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's precedent in Melrose. And I would suggest that over my last 2 years on the council, and certainly Councilor Trementozzi can speak for his 14 years on the council, it is unusual to have an issue-based resolution come before us and be passed. That's not to say that it hasn't occurred, and it's not to say that it shouldn't. And I understand we have a new council here, but we have to be very cautious about the door that we're opening, because by what standard are we going to file and pass issue-based resolutions? Is it based on all of our personal failings? Is it really based on the true spirit of the community? And what is the barometer to determine that anyways? What is that barometer? Is it the people who are most vocal and who reach out to us? It's certainly not indicative of the silent majority who sit at home and may not send emails or who may not call us. So I think we just have to be very careful. I commend Councilor Migliarelli. I support the spirit of what she's attempting to do here, and I support, obviously, recycling. I don't know anyone who doesn't. But we just have to be very cautious about the precedent that we set here in Melrose when we file and pass issue-based ordinances. Because again, we have no standard. What is the standard that we apply? And what is the barometer that we use to measure what the pulse of the community is? So I would just offer that because once we pass something like this, there's really no coming back from it. Especially Councillor Stewart said he had, heard from constituents. I think Councillor Migliarelli said the same thing. So does that mean that we're giving an invitation to people that when they can come together and, coalesce on a particular issue, that based on that issue, especially if it's an issue that we support, that we're going to file a resolution? So again, that's just some cautionary counsel. The other thing I would say is that there's a way to do this beyond the symbolism, as Councillor Trementozzi said. And the way you can do that, and I commend Councillor Migliarelli for reaching out to Councillor Trementozzi's office, is to just work offline. We don't have to do this in the public domain. We can work behind the scenes with Senator Lewis. And I think it's unfortunate because we certainly have an opportunity to work with our former colleague, Representative Lipa Garabedian, to do this. This is something that we can push and try to enact short of something that is merely symbolic, as Councillor Trementozzi said, albeit important, but something that is going to run the risk of creating a precedent in Melrose that may be very difficult for us to come back from. So again, thank you to Councillor Migliarelli for filing this, but if this passes this evening, which I seem to think that it will, and it comes before the full council, I cannot be in support of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor McMaster. Anyone else for the first time? Councilor Eccles.
I guess that I would just point out, that this is a specific instance where we received a lot of constituent concerns about pending legislation. It's not a resolution for something that we'd like to see put forward by one of our representatives. It's pending in the State House, and it matches exactly with an overwhelming concern that we heard on a particular issue that we saw. So when we talk about precedent, I think that, representing what we heard overwhelmingly from our constituents during a discussion on pending legislation is an important thing to keep in mind when voting for this, at least for me, was that I heard the constituents, and it is something that we can voice our support of in the State House.
Thank you, Councilor Eccles. Councilor Trementozzi.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Councilor McNaught, for those words. I think you're absolutely correct. We have not used this form of presentation through the resolution process. I don't think we should really just be setting forth precedent for doing these type of resolutions. They were symbolic. Hey, listen, I'm all in favor of recycling. I have issues with nip bottles as well, and that could be addressed. But I have not heard overwhelming evidence to support that the community as a whole wants to revisit the bottle bill, and this is what this resolution addresses, is specifically the bottle bill in plastic bottles. Yes, it's before the state legislature, but it hasn't passed because there is evidence, significant hearings being conducted, and there's a split of opinion as to whether the community as a large, that the state in its entirety wants to extend the bottle bill beyond what it is now. So that's, I think, Councilor McNaught McMaster, I'm sorry, Councilor McMaster is correct. We got to be careful on sending these resolutions forth, and we haven't heard. And again, it's we haven't had the opportunity for full public hearing on this because of the circumstances we're faced with these days with the coronavirus and lack of support. But I don't hear overwhelming support. There is a group, and it's a limited group that are pushing an agenda, but we can't. I don't feel that it's appropriate to put this in the form of a resolution to send up to the State House. Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trementozzi. If anyone else for the second time? Hearing nothing else on discussion, I'll entertain any motions on the floor.
Would motion to recommend to the full board?
Second.
Motion to recommend for passage by Counselor Sinella, seconded by Counselor Migliarelli. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll of voting members?
Chairman McNaught,
Yes.
Counselor Trementozzi,
No.
Counselor Sinella,
Yes.
Counselor Eccles,
Yes.
Counselor Migliarelli,
Yes.
President Gregoritis.
Yes.
That is 5 yes, 1 no.
Motion passes. It'll be sent to the full committee. And that is all of the business that we had on the agenda for this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Counselor Eccles, seconded by Counselor Sinella. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Chairman McNaught,
Yes.
Counselor Trementozzi,
Yes.
Counselor Sinella,
Yes.
Counselor Eccles,
Yes.
Counselor Migliarelli,
Yes.
President Gregoritis.
Yes.
6 yes.
6 yeses, this meeting is adjourned.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.